Okay. Just gotta admit all into the loading into the everybody's coming.
There she is.
Turn that off. Okay, see you. Bye.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Sure, it's not the first time.
Amy said, Annie, Amy said,
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. We are wearing our masks and we are practicing staying healthy while we work. So if at any time you can't hear me, feel free to write in the text box. I know that everybody is muted right now. If you can't hear, if you need to clarify. I also wanted to point out that if you have a question at any time throughout the presentation, our Executive Director of the Office of Business and Community Services, Christina Slattery, will be taking those, and she'll be taking those through the chat box on Zoom. So we'll be going over those at the very end of the presentation. So let's get started. All right, thank you again for joining us for our first webinar of the Understanding Kentucky's Target Markets webinar series. We're really excited about this whole series. Each one of us at the cabinet, the project managers, all focus on a specific industry, and today I'm excited to share with you a few of which that I focus on: food and beverage and agriculture. So to get started, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Annie Franklin, and I'm a native of Winchester, Kentucky, and a graduate of Morehead State University. My background is in sales and marketing, and fun fact about me, I spent about 5 years working and living in Hong Kong as well as Orlando, Florida for the Disney company as an entertainer. But for over a year and a half now, I have been focusing primarily on the food and beverage industry, agribusiness, agriculture or Agrotech, and consumer goods. So a question I want to ask to start this presentation off is, why Kentucky? And this is a question that I want you to be thinking about through all of these industry presentations. Why is Kentucky the best pick for any of these companies? Why should we be the only pick? Well, throughout this presentation, we'll be going over different points that make Kentucky the only option and the best option. So the three industries that I mentioned earlier, food and beverage, agribusiness, and consumer goods, are all extremely broad. So we decided to break down different companies that would qualify as a food and beverage company, an agribusiness company, or consumer goods. And the list was extremely long, so we decided to condense it down to the bullet points that we have here up on the screen. And after taking a look at each of these companies, they're still extremely broad. But something that we did notice was that they all work cohesively together. And essentially, they make their own supply chain. If you think about it, a farmer creates a product or a raw material. He then sends it off to a food and beverage manufacturer. That food and beverage manufacturer can then send it off to a consumer goods manufacturer that can finish the product and send it off to either a restaurant or a grocery store or direct to consumer. So what this says to me is that we have an opportunity to recruit not only one type of company, but we have an opportunity to recruit all three different types of companies. And I would think that they would want to locate in close proximity. So we have a great opportunity here. But let's take a look at these industries on the global scale. This is a huge industry, $5 trillion to be exact, which means we have a lot of people hired by either a food and beverage manufacturer, an agribusiness company, a consumer goods company, which makes up about 40% of our world's employment, not to mention 10% of global consumer spending. The UN estimates that we will need to increase our food supply by about 70% over the next 30 years to feed the world's growing population. So that's a great indicator that this industry is going to continue to grow, whether it be in the next year, the next 5 years. It has to grow to meet the needs of our growing population. But let's scale this back even more and take a look at these industries at a national scale. The U.S. makes up about 11% of that 40% global employment, which is about 22 million jobs. And a big chunk of those jobs, if you look at the pie chart to the right, are within the food service industry. Now, as many of you know, we are going through a pandemic right now, and that food service industry has been impacted pretty hard by the pandemic. Actually, the entire industry has been impacted by COVID-19. But we'll talk about the challenges that the industry has been facing, due in part to the pandemic, a little later on in the presentation. But throughout the pie chart, you can see that we decided to break this down not only in food and beverage, but we even have a little bit showing the textile industry, leather manufacturing, farming, forestry, food and beverage. And it just basically shows that we have a lot of different types of jobs out in the market within the U.S. Another point I wanted to share with you is that food accounted for 12.9% of Americans' household expenditures. It was behind housing and transportation, which is another good point, that food is a basic human need. We all need food for survival. So it's another great indicator that this industry is not only going to last, but it's going to grow and it's going to be consistent. Another question I want to ask you is, how does this industry grow? What does it need to do? Well, it needs to follow trends. It needs to figure out where this market is going in order to stay above other companies. So one point, I'm sure that you've heard about this before, is blockchain technology. Consumers are really wanting to find out where their products are coming from. IBM was the first company of its kind to create this platform, a food trust platform, where they could work with major companies like Walmart, Kroger, Tyson, Nestle. That way they can instill this technology for internal and external processes. This external process allows user-friendly technology for consumers to find out where their food is coming from. So if you're familiar with QR code technology, I'm sure you've seen those squiggly squares at the grocery stores or at different stores with products. They're on everything. And if you haven't tried the QR code before, I'm actually going to do it with you. If you take out your smartphone, if you have one, and open up the camera, and you hover the camera over that squiggly square, if you're close enough to it, there should be a little drop down on the top part of the screen. Tap that drop down and it should take you to the Cabinet for Economic Development's website. I programmed that way you could see how this technology works. But for most companies, it would take you to the website where they've actually logged all this technology in, so you can find out whether your food has traveled hours to get to the grocery store, who handled it, who picked it if it were out of a farm, whether it was sprayed with pesticides. There's lots of information that can be recorded within this QR code technology. Depends on the company, of course, but it's great for traceability purposes. Another point that we wanted to share was plant-based products. I'm sure that most of you have seen the Impossible Whopper from Burger King. Impossible Foods and plant-based foods, for that matter, have really made their name known throughout fast food restaurant chains, grocery stores, kind of everywhere. And Burger King was the first of its kind to really step out in front of the rest to say, hey, we have this option on our menu now. Others followed suit, like White Castle, A&W, Cheesecake Factory. Starbucks actually just signed with Impossible Foods to create an Impossible breakfast sandwich. We noted on here that Disney Resorts and Parks are actually going to offer an Impossible food option. So they're really, really gaining momentum right now with various restaurants and other establishments to create another item on the menu. Impossible Foods' biggest competitor, though, is Beyond Meat. That's another company that I'm sure you've seen at grocery stores or natural food stores. Their strategy was actually to target, instead of fast food chains and restaurants, the grocery stores, the direct-to-consumer marketing strategy. So both those companies are really growing and, like I said, gaining momentum. So I have no doubt that they will continue to make huge strides throughout the coming years, and who knows where they'll be next. Another point I wanted to share was organic and natural foods. It's another trending item that's been around for quite some time. And at one point in time, consumers would have chosen the cheaper item as opposed to the more expensive item at the grocery store. But now we're seeing that organic sales account for every 4% of total US food sales, which just shows that consumers are really conscientious of the kinds of foods that they're purchasing and putting in their bodies. And organic products are now available in over 20,000 natural food stores, which is not a big surprise. And the big surprise here is that they're in conventional grocery stores, actually nearly 3 out of 4. So grocery stores are really, really honing in on this trend and trying to advertise and market as many organic and natural food options as possible. But with the trends, again, we need to take a look at what are the challenges of this market. And I mentioned earlier COVID-19, but prior to the pandemic, we were looking at volatile commodity prices, trade restrictions, the competitive industry, which I think all were a domino effect of each other. Oops. Oh, there we go. Hopefully everybody sees the challenges slide on there. Excuse me, my hands were kind of all over the place on this little clicker, but they all were, the volatile commodity prices, the competitive industry, the trade restrictions, they all were a domino effect of each other, in my opinion. So once this pandemic came along, it just added on to the challenges that the food and beverage manufacturers, those in agriculture or agribusiness, the consumer goods manufacturer, that they were all facing. And an article that I read from Deloitte said that COVID-19 was truly a disruption to the supply chain. It was a disruption in the fact that you had restaurants closing, which meant that the restaurants weren't creating a large industrial order for food, which meant that the food and beverage manufacturers had to scale back, and they had to scale back on their orders for raw materials. So it truly was a disruption, and it's definitely a disruption for out-of-home eating. But if you think about in-home eating, you know, that has actually increased. So companies that their whole business model is at-home simplicity. So if you think about Blue Apron or HelloFresh, I would imagine that those companies have seen an increase in sales. So yes, companies are experiencing challenges right now, but I also think that this has caused them to be more creative. So whether they're thinking of new departments to adhere and to market to those at home, creating an at-home lifestyle, I think that that's where a lot of these companies are going to shift their thinking towards in the future. But now that we've looked at the US, everything nationally, let's take a look at where food and beverage is trending in Kentucky. And food and beverage is a large part of our economy. As you can see on the slide, we have over 300 food and beverage facilities, which means we have a lot of people that are hired within these types of companies, over 50,000 employees within this food and beverage space. And looking at the last 5 years, over $4 billion were announced in capital investment, and over 6,000 jobs were announced as well. And not stopping there, this industry actually contributed $7 billion back into our economy, which just says that Kentucky really wants to keep this industry around, and we want to continue to encourage companies to grow, and we want to continue to recruit these kinds of companies as well. And the last point I want to make is that this is not a surprise to us Kentuckians. 95% of the world's bourbon is produced here in Kentucky. And it's so embedded in our culture that it's second nature that sometimes we forget to mention it to our friends in other states, to folks that are visiting from out of the country. But half the time, they do not know this statistic. They don't know that what they're drinking or what their friends are drinking was made here, that what they've seen at grocery stores was actually manufactured here in Kentucky and has been here for years. It's something that I take great pride in when I see folks that are from out of the state. I enjoy telling them how bourbon is distilled and sharing with them my favorite distilleries to visit. So it's a great recruitment tool and a good piece to share about Kentucky and how our culture is different from others. But taking a look at that 300 food and beverage facilities that we mentioned earlier in the slide, these facilities are actually all over the state. We have some facilities that are located in our more populated areas, of course, but they're scattered across the state. It's a great indicator that, you know, these companies, they're not leaning toward one part of the state more than others. They could actually locate in any one of our 120 counties. So this is a good recruitment option to say, hey, we can have a food and beverage company within our county and community, and there's nothing stopping from an industry like this from coming here. So thinking within a company's mind of what they're looking for when they're approaching a site selection search or wanting to find a new home, there are some points that are a little bit different than other industries that we'd like to share, one of which is proximity to suppliers and raw materials. We have an example up here showing that Smartwood USA, which is a popsicle stick manufacturer that's now in Corbin, Kentucky, they actually located to Corbin because of the abundance of beechwood trees, which is in their manufacturing process. And this actually spiked the company to buy local, something we encourage our companies to do, not only to locate, you know, within the state, we want everybody to come here, but try to purchase as much of your items, your raw materials from the state as well. Another point we want to share is the proximity to customers. I, for one, can say that I don't want to eat old food. So these food and beverage manufacturers, they want to be close to grocery stores or they're direct to consumer, what have you, because at the end of the day, they have to stay compliant with the FDA. And if that food goes bad, that means they're losing money. So they want to improve their bottom line by being close to those grocery stores, being close to those customers, and being conscientious of the transportation costs as well, which brings me to my next point. Transportation costs can be a big issue logistically. If we think about a company having to ship their product across the US, that is very expensive. Not only that, if they have to find temperature sensitive boxes or packaging materials to make sure that product stays fresh, that's expensive as well. So they want to be sure that they're close to their customer, so they have to cut down on those transportation costs and automobiles and packaging materials as well. It all goes into that. The next point is something that's pretty universal across every industry. They want to have skilled labor. If you're a local economic developer, make sure that you understand what kind of labor you have within your community, whether they have transferable skills or a technical school nearby that has a program that could easily be transferred on to your company, so ready to work. That's something that the company definitely thinks about in their initial search for finding a home. The next point we'd like to share is utility infrastructure. Understand your industrial parks, your sites, your facilities. Make sure that you understand if there are any needs that you need to make, or if there's any changes or any updates or anything like that. Be very transparent and open with the company, because they'd rather learn about those utility needs and on the front end of the project as opposed to the back end of the project. And something I wanted to share, I experienced with several different food and beverage companies through RFIs and just talking with different site selectors, is that the energy needs is pretty standard across the board, maybe different depending if they're a unique company, but water is typically something that all of these food and beverage companies typically require more of than most. So understand your municipalities, understand if you have any raw water sources nearby. That is something that is tremendous when speaking to these food and beverage manufacturers. And if you can mention that in the beginning, that's always a good hook for the company to come back, because most places oftentimes may not have the updated municipalities or the raw water sources. Next, we wanted to share environmental related issues with the site. Be sure that you understand if there are any issues at all with your site, to be very transparent and open to the company about that, as well as know your inventory that you have within your community. If you've got a food grade facility, be sure to advertise and market that first thing. Those food grade facilities, they go fast. Typically because there are few of those facilities within the state, and companies, we're finding they want to find existing facilities, and half the time food and beverage manufacturers are having to build because they either can't find a food grade facility, or the facility that they find is not food grade, and they have to really customize their facility and then have to build. The next thing we wanted to share was economic incentives. If you've worked with us before, you know that the state offers performance-based incentives, but if you have any local incentives, be open to share those as well. We believe that incentives don't make a bad deal a good deal. We just believe that it makes it sweeter. So I put this a little lower on the list, but sometimes companies, they do consider economic incentives, at the top of their search. The next thing that I think is important for a lot of companies to know is that if you have a build-ready site, if you have this certification, that means that the company can start building. They want to be up and operational yesterday. So having this stamp of approval just says to them that they have to jump through less hoops to make sure that they're going to be operational as soon as possible. But moving along from the site selection options from the food and beverage manufacturing industry, let's take a look at how Kentucky measures up within the agriculture space. And as you can see, we have a lot to be proud of. We are ranked nationally for a number of things, but in agriculture, we're actually ranked 6th for having the highest number of farms within a state, which just means we've got a lot of farms. Over 75,000 to be exact, over 13 million acres, which also says that we are more than one product within the state. We have a lot of products that are being grown that we're known for. We are a poultry state. Actually, that is the largest agricultural commodity that we have here in the state, but we're also known for soybeans. We're known for winter wheat, hay. We're actually known for broilers. We're also known as a cattle state, 8th largest beef cow producing state in the United States. So we are very proud of all of these national rankings. And again, if you are someone in your local community that is working to help your community grow, understand the agricultural layout, know your farmers, know what you're growing, know what's in close proximity, because you could have a company come in and they may need a certain raw material that your community may have. So always be cognizant of that and be willing to share a little bit more about what your community has to offer. But some of the programs that we have to support are agribusiness or agrotech or agricultural related companies and industries. We have over 51, I'd say over 51 agricultural organizations, but one of which, Kentucky Proud, which is a program that is administered through the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. It's basically, if you're unfamiliar with Kentucky Proud, it's our stamp of it's made here in Kentucky, and we're extremely proud of it. Our Made in the USA stamp, pretty much. And it's a very simple application process. If you go to kyproud.com, there is a step-by-step on how to become a member. And once you become a member, you can put that Kentucky Proud sticker on your product, and everybody will know that it was made and manufactured here in Kentucky. Another partner that we wanted to share is the Kentucky Distillers Association. They actually market the Bourbon Trail. I'm sure you're familiar with that if you're familiar with the bourbon industry. And they're one of our great partners and one of our strong partners throughout this COVID response. We actually were working, our group was working to help provide PPE for the state, and the Kentucky Distillers Association worked very closely with us and was able to work with our distillers and help donate over 125,000 gallons of hand sanitizer to different groups, hospitals, individuals, and we are so grateful and so thankful and so happy to have them as one of our strong partners at the Cabinet for Economic Development. But if you are curious about any other agricultural organizations, please visit the link on the page, kyagr.com/ag-links.html. Another initiative that I wanted to bring up, and if you tuned into the governor's press conference, which was last week, he announced Kentucky is making a push for Agrotech, Kentucky Agrotech, if you will. And Angelica Sanchez Vega, she actually works for the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development. She is spearheading this initiative for our cabinet. And if you have any questions or like more information, please visit agrotech.ky.gov, or you can email her at angelica.vega@ky.gov. But we're extremely excited about this. The governor actually signed a public-private partnership with 16 different organizations, one of which being the Dutch government. And if you're unfamiliar with the Netherlands, they are leading the way in innovative agricultural technology. So there's no other state that's really doing this. We are the lead in this movement. So I'm excited and I can't wait to see where this goes. Well, we've talked about several different companies within the state, and I wanted to say that these are well-known companies. They're recognizable all over the world, and we should be excited to share that they're manufacturing their product in Kentucky. I'm pretty sure most people have heard of Tyson Foods or Wild Turkey or Coca-Cola, for example, or J.M. Smucker. I mean, we have so many well-known brands. We should be talking about them all day long with our potential prospects. And not only do we have manufacturing companies here in Kentucky, we have a lot of companies that decided to locate their headquarters here. So that says something about Kentucky. That says that we're definitely a food and beverage hub of the United States, if not the world. And some people want to shy away from talking about these well-known companies being within their home or being close by because they're afraid that it's their competitor. But I personally feel that it brings about an excitement to the state. And I would think that a company would want to be a part of the excitement by being close by and being a part of this long list of well-known brands that decided to locate their company here in Kentucky. But if you're unfamiliar with any of these companies, here are some of the products that they manufacture, which you might recognize. Jif Peanut Butter in Lexington, Dippin' Dots in Paducah, Ale 81 in my home of Winchester, Ragu Spaghetti Sauce in Owensboro, Airheads Candy in Erlanger, Laughing Cow Cheese in Litchfield, Pop-Tarts in Pikeville, and then Hot Pockets in Mount Sterling. Those are some well-known products, again, manufactured here in the state of Kentucky. And with that diverse amount of different companies and the products that we have manufactured here, it's no surprise that we have a diverse workforce. And something to remember that yes, we do have a diverse workforce, and some companies require specific skill sets. These skills are also very transferable. So something to bring up when you're talking to companies, that if you've got a company close nearby or a technical school or what have you, their skills can be offered and welcomed by any food and beverage manufacturer. So, I mean, it ranges, you can see, from animal slaughtering to tortilla manufacturing. We've got a lot of different skill sets. And again, please do share with your prospects as you move forward with any companies or site selectors. And not only that, our infrastructure for education is set up very well. We have institutions all over the state that provide programs that will help students go to the workforce much easier, whether it be internships or just programs that go over different variables of what they need to be a good employee to a company. You'll find it within these institutions. And these institutions actually have taken on the initiative of helping companies become more innovative. They have developed their own research and development programs, whether it be a research center or a farm or a lab. A lot of these institutions provide services to help companies grow, and they want to be a part of the growth as well. And we at the state, we want to help you with your workforce as well. We work with our partners at KCTCS, the Kentucky Career Center, the Labor Cabinet, to provide recruitment and job placement programs and services, customized training, incentives, skill development. We want to be as helpful as possible, not only just on the incentive side or maybe just looking at site selection, but also with workforce. Now, shifting gears a little bit, going back to why Kentucky. Well, I believe Kentucky is a great choice logistically, and because of where we're placed basically on the map. We are centrally located, which means you can get to half of the country's population within a day's drive. You can get to some of the country's largest cities within an hour-and-a-half flight. So we are very, very close to so many places in the U.S., and that's something that we need to share as well. But just some statistics that we can share with our site selectors and our companies. We're third worldwide for air cargo hubs and second total air cargo. We have 6 airports, 2 international, 10 interstates, lots of rail track, lots of navigable waterways. So we will make sure that we get your raw materials to you and your product to your customer. We definitely have the means to do it, and we're excited to work with you to make that happen. But looking at some of the companies that have decided to locate here, whether it be locate or expand, I wanted to touch on a couple. One, they decided to locate here, and this is their first location of sorts, and another that we'll talk about that's expanding in Kentucky. One of which, I'm sure if you tuned into the governor's announcement, App Harvest will be opening in the fall, but made a $97 million investment, and over 285 jobs were announced in Moorhead. If you're unfamiliar with what they do, they are creating a state-of-the-art greenhouse that's unlike any other, and they're using the Dutch technology as well to make this happen. They will be the largest greenhouse in North America, about 2.8 million square feet. That is a big greenhouse. But not only that, they're using chemical-free practices, they're recycling rainwater, they're using all kinds of technology that is very cutting edge and different than your average greenhouse. Not to mention they're using all kinds of LED installation that again will be another world's largest for one single building. So we're excited for this company. We can't wait to see its growth. They're growing tomatoes, and they should be able to supply the Eastern Seaboard with all their tomatoes, if not the entire country, and hopefully the world someday. But Jonathan Webb, their CEO, said that we need more companies like this in case another crisis, which he predicted about 15 years could be another crisis, happens again. So we're excited to have a company like this in Kentucky, and we're excited for their growth. So taking a look at another company that has decided to expand here in Kentucky, T. Marzetti. They actually make salad dressings and they make specialty foods. Their sister company, Sister Schubert's Rolls, is actually located in Hart County as well. and they're both owned by the Lancaster Colony Company. But they've been in Hart County, Horse Cave, Kentucky for about 14 years. And this past year, they decided to expand over 184,000 square feet of expansion, to be exact, which is a large expansion, and they could have gone anywhere else. Their headquarters is actually in Ohio, but they decided to expand here in Kentucky. And reason being, as you can see the quote here from their CEO and president, they had a commitment to the community, a strong partnership with their local government as well as state government. And they really, really admired that and wanted to continue that commitment by having this expansion. And as you can see during the announcement, we had Governor Brashear and the president at the bottom picture, just talking about what the expansion will look like, and that we're excited for what's to come for Team Marzetti. Now that we've talked about what the industry looks like at a global, national, and regional scale, and how we can assist companies as they're, looking at which place should I locate, let's talk about specifically recruiting these types of companies. Again, understand your agricultural industry, know who's farming what in your community, and if they would be willing to potentially start a contract with one of these food and beverage companies. It's always a good conversation starter when you're with a food and beverage manufacturer that you have their raw materials just next door. Take inventory of your sites and buildings. Make sure that you know what you have available and what could potentially suit this company, whether looking for 400,000 square feet of building or they're looking for a site that meets their needs and they need it to be a food certified site. Understand your workforce. So understand if you've got a trade school nearby or a technical school that is teaching students how to be the right candidate for a food and beverage manufacturer. Be willing to talk about that and talk about if you've got any institutions nearby, that we would be willing to set up any kind of meetings with our partners at any of these universities to talk about what the workforce and what the students look like at their institutions. Also, be willing to talk about the ease of doing business in your community. Companies that, again, they want to be up and operational yesterday, so they don't want to have to go through hurdles and hoops to have their site zoned or to get a support letter for incentives. They want to be able to know that this process is going to be as seamless as possible. So if you're an economic developer, be willing to talk about that and try to build your relationship with your local government if you haven't already. That way, this process can be as smooth as possible. And lastly, something I would encourage anybody to do for any industry is to tell a unique story about yourself. We are all humans and we all want human connection. And yes, the companies, they want to find the right building, they want to find the right community, and they want to be able to hire the right types of employees. But when a company is narrowing down the sites and the facilities and communities for a final search, it could be that story that you told them at the site visit that makes them remember you and think, oh, well, I really loved that site. And you know what? I really love community support. And I feel like this community really has it together and could support us in the future. That could be the make or break as they try to narrow down the final site. So be prepared to tell something about your community or yourself or something that will really resonate with the site selector or the company. So as you think about how you can recruit, just know that you also have a partner with us at the Cabinet for Economic Development. We offer a wide array of programs and services that can assist you as you grow your community and can assist companies as they grow their company, whether it be in your city or your county. We offer incentives, we offer site evaluation services, work-ready programs. We talk about opportunity zones within our cabinet as well. So feel free to please email me or any one of us if you know us at the cabinet. If you're interested in any one of these programs for your community or want to talk through incentives, I would be happy to help and talk with you about those as well. So circling back around to my first question, why Kentucky? Why are we the best? Why are we the only option? Well, let's go through the points that I pulled from the presentation. Kentucky is centrally located. These companies can receive and distribute product in a timely manner, super fast. Remember, proximity to our raw materials and proximity to our customers. Think about that, especially when you have these companies in front of you. Kentucky's full of suppliers. Again, the Commonwealth is an agriculture state with many farms, and we can supply raw materials to you. So be willing to talk about that. Be willing to understand the types of things that you have grown in your community. Next, we're focusing on Agrotech. The Commonwealth is building infrastructure to provide Agrotech companies, whether they be small or large, assistance for their growth. And I have dated on here, June 24th is when the governor announced this public-private partnership with the Netherlands. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's no other state that's really doing this. We're making the initiative, and that says something that we from the state to the local level are striving to assist our companies, actually across the spectrum, but definitely in Agrotech, with anything they may need. And lastly, we're owned by some of the largest food and beverage companies in the world. And they chose Kentucky as their home because of the low cost of doing business, the logistics, our strong agriculture community, and our strong partnerships with our local and state government. That says something, and we should always bring that home when we're having our last discussions with these food and beverage companies or these agribusiness companies or consumer goods manufacturers, that we had these other well-known companies locate here for all of these reasons, and we believe that you should be the next company on that list to locate here as well. Be a part of the excitement. Be a part of the food and beverage manufacturing hub in the US, if not the world. So with that, if anybody has any questions, feel free to type those into the text box. And I think Christina has a few so far. So Christina, what are, feel free to share any questions that you've collected along the way.
We do. We have a few that have come in. Sarah Bowman with Louisville Forward asks, are there any specific financial incentives offered to Agrotech businesses?
We don't have any specific Agrotech incentives, but we're working to provide specific assistance, if you will. And if you have any more questions about that, Angelica will be able to provide some clarity and some information. Again, she's leading our initiative on this. Her email is Angelica, ANGELICA, .vega, VEGA @ky.gov.
Thank you, Annie. I know that the new Agrotech website has compiled all of those different agribusiness incentives together. So I think, to your point, that'll be a great resource. So next, Jeremy Worley from Northern Kentucky has a question about industrial hemp and how does that play into the sustainable food packaging industry?
So hemp is a growing industry, and we're currently watching it evolve and grow. As you know, hemp pretty much unveiled about a year ago legally. And so we're seeing how this industry will develop over the next couple years, this year as well. We're excited for its growth. As far as the food and beverage space, again, with that evolvement of the industry, it may evolve within the food and beverage space. We're still awaiting FDA approvals and rulings upon hemp and CBD. So more to come, if you will.
Thank you. Question from Rick Gaines in Elizabethtown. Can you elaborate a little bit on wastewater requirements and how that impacts food and beverage projects?
Sure. So again, I mentioned that I feel like with all of our RFIs that we get in that are food and beverage related, there's always a great water need. And it's always different depending on the type of company. But I feel though that companies select the areas that have the upgraded municipalities, that have the raw water sources, or that just the locals are able to talk about and speak to their water requirements or needs just openly and honestly. So again, every company is different. We could talk specifically about a company that focuses on water solely, or a company that is a grain processor but also needs a lot of water. Again, it's all different, but it's something that we've seen across the board is needed. So just again, be aware of if you've got any issues within your municipalities, be able to talk about that, or be able to figure out, how can we upgrade those? Or if you've got great municipalities and great raw water sources, market that as much as you can.
Great. We've had a few questions come in about sharing the presentation. It has been recorded, and we do plan to post that on our website. Additionally, we do have a food and beverage landing page highlighting the industry on the cabinet's website as well. Okay, we'll give it a few minutes for any other questions. Okay. I think that's all we've got, Annie.
With that, I thank everybody for tuning in. We greatly appreciate your attendance for these webinars. If in the future, the pandemic decides to go away, I hope so very soon. Just know that the project managers are willing to come to your community, or if it's via Zoom, we're willing to speak to your local government or anybody that you think that this presentation would be helpful towards. We would be happy to do this presentation for them as well. So just know that. And again, thank you so much for your attendance and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.